Facebook says it has a plan for fighting misinformation if the US election, in their words, descends into chaos. But are Facebook and other social media platforms doing enough to stop the spread of fake news and incitement of violence? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Imran Khan. Social media shape the way people across the globe perceive everything from politics to pop culture. And tech companies have long taken a hands-off approach, arguing that users should be able to judge content for themselves. But critics say the social media giants have a responsibility to make sure their platforms aren't being misused to incite violence or spread misinformation. Facebook now says it'll take aggressive measures to restrict users if the US election in November descends into chaos. This is what the company's head of global affairs, Nick Clegg, said in an interview to the Financial Times. There are some break glass options available to us if there really is an extremely chaotic and, worse still, violent set of circumstances. We have acted aggressively in other parts of the world where we think that there is a real civic instability, and we obviously have the tools to do that. Facebook says it has previously limited content on its platform during periods of unrest in countries like Myanmar and India. But it has faced criticism for failing to prevent Russian attempts to manipulate the 2016 US elections. Facebook's now under mounting pressure to address misinformation and voter suppression ahead of November's vote. There are growing concerns that media can be used to contest a result or even call for violent protests. Among Facebook's new policies will be adding a warning to posts in which candidates might be prematurely claiming victory. Let's bring in our guests. In Washington, D.C., Rebecca McKinnon, Director of Ranking Digital Rights and author of Consent of the Networked. In the Dutch city of Maastricht, Catalina Goanta, an assistant professor in private law at Maastricht University and co-manager of the Maastricht Law and Tech Lab. Now, I want to begin in Washington, D.C. With you, Rebecca McKinnon. These are extraordinary words from the Facebook boss, Nick Clegg. He says, if the US election descends into chaos, they have a plan. But aren't these words a little bit disingenuous, given Facebook's failures in the past when it comes to policing false information on that platform? Is this too little too late, do you think?
Well, it is. It is too little too late. My program, actually, we released a report a few months ago where we talked about the entire problem is their fundamental business model that enables people, not only advertisers, but also people with pages who pay to boost their pages, to target very specific people according to their traits, their race, their, various traits, where they are, with specific messages. And that's how the platform is organized. So it's organized for people to strategically work to manipulate information, to manipulate public opinion. So to say that after the election they have a plan to limit disinformation, it's going to be as difficult as it has been for them to stop COVID misinformation and all the other misinformation that has continued to rage on the platform.
But Rebecca, this Facebook's argument is that actually they've been quite successful with combating COVID misinformation. There is a COVID information center on Facebook. It pops up on your feed every day, tries to give you the right information. Facebook say that they are trying, but the platform is huge. I mean, what you're suggesting is that they're not doing enough, but Facebook say that they are.
Well, they are trying. It would certainly be worse if they were not trying. But this is fundamentally about the design of the platform. And it's about the design of a platform that's optimized to help advertisers reach as many eyeballs as possible, not to serve as a platform for informed public discourse. And so, therefore, because its algorithms optimize content that's going to get the most engagement, which is often the most controversial, because their platform enables people to be targeted with messages. This effort that they have to curb disinformation is a little bit like a Band-Aid on a sucking bullet hole.
Catalina Guanta, for a very long time, Big Social has always said, look, it's up to you how you use the platform. We just give you the platform. It's up to you who you react to, who you engage with. That's not our responsibility. There's a very, very American argument there. It comes to, freedom of speech. But right now, what we have is a freedom of speech that's gone slightly crazy, where anybody can post absolutely anything. Now, whose responsibility is it then? Is it Big Social, Facebook's responsibility, or is it education on part of the user? Should we be more knowledgeable about what we're clicking on? Do we need social media policies in schools, for example? Do we need to educate ourselves?
Imran, those are very, very important questions. And let me unpack this, the points that you're making and the questions that you're raising by, first of all, building on what Rebecca was mentioning about the main business model of Facebook. So Rebecca was mentioning that it's possible to buy advertising from Facebook, and that advertising goes into what is known as archives, the ad archives of Facebook, and Twitter has those as well. And what we see is that recently, most specifically in October last year, Twitter announced that it's not going to accept political ads anymore. Facebook also mentioned 1 week before the US elections, we're not going to allow people to buy advertising on the platform for political speech. What that advertising does is, as Rebecca was also mentioning, in a way discriminately in many different social situations, increases the reach of a specific message. This has been the model that we know from Facebook so far. Now, new business models have emerged, and those business models also challenge what you were mentioning earlier, this dichotomy between we have a platform on the one hand and we have a user on the other hand. The picture is not so simple anymore. In 2020, we have a plethora of other users in between with different hats. For instance, social media influencers. Social media influencers do not necessarily have an official definition in any jurisdiction. Maybe there might be guidelines, but we don't know how to define them because they can be anything and everything. And increasingly, because we see that there is this gray space of banning political ads, which are labeled ads in the archive of Twitter and Facebook, I see that there's going to be an increasing opportunity for influencers to become vehicles of advertising for political speech.
But if that happens, Catalina, if they are becoming these vehicles of advertising for political speech, it's not actually illegal, is it? Facebook are allowed to do this.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. Then we're even in murkier waters because, for better or worse, the ads that you see as sponsored ads, which in 2016, there have been so many campaigns of disinformation that have been using the Facebook ad system, but at least they were labeled as such. They were labeled as ads. When you have influencer marketing and when you have an influencer being paid to engage in a political opinion and to disseminate it to the millions of followers they have on multiple platforms, then that becomes even more dangerous because it's very difficult, given their characteristics of relatability, genuine characters, and also their proximity to their followers. It's going to be very difficult for followers to distinguish, is this something that they really mean, or are they getting money to say that? So that's why it's very important to think about extending perhaps existing consumer law rules that apply to advertising also for the kind of political advertising that influencers engage in.
Rebecca McKinnon, Facebook has set up this war room, what they're calling it, a war room for the election. It's going to have a lot of people in it who are going to be policing what's going on the night of the election. If somebody suggests that they have won the election and there's no proof for it, they're going to crack down on that. That's just one example that they've given. But this war room is owned by Facebook. This is the police policing themselves. Is that good enough for you?
Yeah. Well, it is a problem, and Facebook has already said, in the past, we don't know what they're going to do immediately after the election. They haven't made clear, but if the president himself or if many members of his party post content that is clearly false. In the past, Zuckerberg has said that their normal rules don't apply to politicians necessarily. And so how will Facebook apply its rules to these political figures themselves? It's going to get very contentious. This is just a problem with the nature of the entire platform. It has not been sufficiently clear and transparent about how its rules are enforced, about how its advertising system works. People don't know or understand where a lot of the information they're getting is coming from necessarily. They're inclined to believe people who are their friends who may be sharing disinformation. So the system is not set up in a way that favors factual information. And as you say, the trick is how do you oversee this at this point when it is so far down the road already? And as you mentioned, free speech, yes, the Facebook has a right, actually under U.S. First Amendment, to organize its platform how it sees fit, to police or not police content as it sees fit. But the question is, what is its responsibility to society and democracy? Mark Zuckerberg talks a lot about free speech, but in fact, Facebook privileges paid speech, and it continues to do so. It continues to privilege the speech of more powerful public figures over ordinary people in a way that violates people's human right to information and the ability to participate in free and fair democratic processes and to formulate opinion without interference, which is part of a basic fundamental human rights to freedom of expression. So we have a big problem here, and it's pretty late in the day to unwind it. My organization had actually called for Facebook to stop targeted advertising, to shut down its targeted advertising systems entirely several months before the election, so that content could be more organic and that any advertising that happens would be no more targeted than you get on cable television. But of course, that is not good for business to do that, and that is not something they considered.
But Rebecca, you make one point that I think is very interesting. You were talking about oversight there. There was an attempt, there were congressional hearings. Mark Zuckerberg did appear a few years back in front of Congress, and he almost bamboozled them. He almost confused Congress itself because they simply didn't understand what they were dealing with. There were people asking such basic questions about Facebook itself. It didn't really understand the idea of targeted paid advertising that anybody could buy and anybody could put forward. So this is not just a commercial failure of people who, like me, who just don't understand how Facebook works. This is a political failure at the highest level.
It is, although there was another congressional hearing this summer where you saw that Congress has learned a lot. There were very specific questions for Zuckerberg and other corporate executives about their business model, about how targeted advertising works, and citing internal emails that have since been leaked that shows that the company had actually done internal studies around misinformation, conspiracy theories, hate speech, and so on, and had elected not to take action to address them fully. And there are now plans or proposals, both in terms of antitrust, so in order to increase competition and to potentially break up part of Facebook, or at least to subject it to much greater constraint in terms of its control across the market, but also proposals for privacy law. There are proposals that my organization and others have made for transparency requirements. There needs to be a lot more transparency by these companies about how content is being managed on the platform. There needs to be impact assessment. Companies need to be doing civil rights and human rights impact assessment to really identify the social impact of their platform and their business model, how it's affecting society, how it's affecting political processes and social dynamics and potential discrimination, and to show how they're taking concrete steps to mitigate that. And up until really this year, Facebook did not even acknowledge that its platform might have negative civil rights implications.
Well, let's actually, Rebecca, let's talk about that. I would like to bring in Oxford, in the UK, Carissa Velis, an associate professor of philosophy at the University of Oxford and author of Privacy is Power, Why and How You Should Take Back Control of Your Data. Carissa, we've been discussing how Facebook and big social should police itself and whether it actually should police itself. There's a question I want to ask you. Is it time for a United Nations Charter of Digital Rights? Is it time for global oversight over big social?
I think that's an excellent question and an excellent idea. There has to be global oversight, but also national oversight. It's not okay for private companies who have private interests to have oversight of themselves in a sense. And as long as we don't have better auditing systems, we just have to trust them that they won't, for example, interfere with elections. And the rule of law cannot only be based on trust. That's not rigorous enough.
Catalina in Maastricht, we talked about this earlier, but I just want to bring it up again. How do you police this if it's not the UN, if it's not the national governments? Because Facebook's almost too powerful to take on. Mark Zuckerberg can pretty much do whatever he wants.
Yeah, so this is the core question, right? So not if we should police this or if it's too late, but how we should police it right now. What we're dealing with is a legacy regulatory failure that has led to this regulatory subsidy that a lot of digital platforms have had and have been having since the 90s, because regulators simply didn't know what to expect from their business models. So what happens at the European Union level is that later in the year, we're expecting a new draft of the Digital Services Act, which aims to mend the drawbacks of the e-commerce directive, which has led to this burden, this regulatory burden that we have to deal with right now. And I think yesterday, Vera Jourova, who is the European Commissioner for Justice and Consumers, actually met with Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, and they decided that, or they agreed on the fact that there shouldn't be a narrative, they shouldn't follow a narrative of taking down content, but actually trying to focus on the recommender systems and trying to see how content is disseminated on the platform. So if the oversight is going to entail regulators and companies working together and trying to create more transparency, maybe this could be an option. The question is if this is going to be enough. And what we have seen so far is that when we're dealing with recommender systems, basically the bread and butter of any kind of social media platform, those are the systems that determine what you see as a user. A lot of questions arise when you're trying to really to limit the reach of the content. This has led to concerns, for instance, relating to shadow banning. So this, in the end, if not done properly, might lead to even more intransparency questions than actually to solutions.
Carissa Velis in Oxford. Here we are talking about things that we can do. One solution that has been mooted is breaking up big social, breaking up Facebook in particular. Facebook control Instagram, they control WhatsApp, and they have billions of users on their platform. This idea of it being a monopoly and therefore it should be broken up, would that help?
I'm entirely supportive of that, and it would help, but it wouldn't be enough. As long as we have the data economy, as long as we get personalized content, then democracy will be at risk, because there will be a risk of personalized propaganda, and somebody will make use of that. Somebody will misuse data that way. So I think we should end the data economy. Personal data shouldn't be the kind of thing that you can buy or sell or take advantage of people. It puts us in a too vulnerable a position, both as individuals, but also as societies.
But you can't ban data. You can't ban the data economy. That's half the world's economy gone right there. It's worth billions. And we've now given Facebook and other social media platforms so much information anyway that this information is relevant for the next 20 years. You can't simply get rid of it overnight, surely.
Not overnight, but surely we can. There have been times in the economy in the past in which very big portions of the economy have been banned because we have realized that it's too toxic. So we can use data and we can share data, but we can't sell it. We can't make businesses that profit off of that. So of course, if you go to the doctor, you have to give up your data in order to get care. And of course, we can use data to make public services better and so on. But it shouldn't be something that people profit off, because then it's going to be misused. It creates an incentive for misuse.
Rebecca McKinnon in DC, is there any political will to do what Carissa is suggesting and get rid of the data economy?
Well, here in the United States, it all depends on what happens on November 3rd with the election. I think that if the Democrats take the Senate, if we end up having a Democrat in the White House, I think a lot of regulatory proposals are going to move. But even if things go another way, there's actually quite a lot of bipartisan interest in strong privacy law. So we will see something in the United States. I think Europe with the there's a court ruling on something called the Privacy Shield that enables U.S. companies to transfer data that has basically been struck down. U.S. needs to prove that it's able to protect data across borders, or it's going to be very bad economically for U.S. companies in general. So there's a lot of reasons why I think more regulation may move forward in the United States, regardless of the political outcome. But look, I want to put something in a broader historical perspective here, because we are in a moment where a lot of regulation and sort of how power is organized through information needs to be rethought. You know, a long time ago, there was a point in history when our labor suddenly became a commodity. There was a time when labor did not have a price, and then suddenly it had a price. And our entire world changed in terms of how society is organized, you know, how communities are organized, how power works in society, how companies are formed, what they can do. The economy of the world entirely was transformed. Now we're at a similar historical moment where information about everything we do and know, our data, is commodified. That's new. And similarly, we don't have the political, social, economic structures, norms, institutions to protect people's rights in this new situation. And so governments, citizens, everyone is scrambling to catch up after a number of companies have already made billions, trillions of dollars off of our data. And now everyone's
Rebecca, we are sadly, Rebecca, we are running out of time, and I do want to come to our other guest, Carissa. Just very quickly, what Rebecca is suggesting is that this is now a commodity, and it's a commodity like others that has a value, but does need to be looked at quite seriously. However, we are looking at companies that are policing themselves, that companies that are using this data to have targeted advertising. The problem isn't the data, is it? The problem is how it's policed, right?
That's part of it, but data is very hard to police. And once you have it, it's very easy to for it to have a leak or some kind of accident, even if you have good intentions. So it's very important to minimize the collection of data. So one way to go about this is also to have fiduciary duties. So fiduciary duties are duties that are implemented when there's an asymmetry of power in a professional relationship, such as doctor and patients, lawyer and clients, financial advisor and clients, and when there can be conflicts of interest. So we can have data, but whoever we share it with, they need to make decisions that are in our interest. Our data should never be us.
I want to thank all our guests, Rebecca McKinnon, Catalina Goanta and Carissa Vallis. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the entire team here in Doha, bye for now.